All right, team, what do you think? You want to start?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're ready.
All right, cool. Well, welcome everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you're keeping well and safe. My name is Kerr Smith. I'm the manager of cooperative community engagement at Gailey Foods Cooperative, which is a Canadian dairy cooperative with members on roughly 1,400 farms, dairy farms across Manitoba and Ontario. And I am fortunate enough today to be joined, as always, by the wonderful Michelle Chrisman. Hello, Michelle.
Hi, Kerr. Hi, Lori. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much to everyone for joining us today. I'm Michelle Chrisman, and I'm the coordinator here at the Gailey Dairy Museum and Cooperative Education Center. And I'm lucky enough to work on this beautiful 100-acre site located near Elmer, Ontario.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. So we appreciate everyone joining for our third installment of the Co-op-Palooza Bedhead Web Ed series. I just realized after all this that I appreciate everyone putting up with my bedhead this whole time. So thanks for joining us. As we've noted, this is usually an in-person retreat and conference, but obviously we couldn't do that this year, so taking it online. And before we introduce our super special guest today and to get in today's session, I'm going to throw it over to Michelle, who's just going to give a couple little housekeeping notes about some of the technical stuff, as we mentioned about the Q&A and chat.
Thank you. So as usual, you'll note that the audience mics have been muted for today's webinar. However, as Kerr mentioned, we encourage you to use the chat function to introduce yourselves, comment, and connect with each other throughout the session. And if you're not familiar with it, just click on the chat icon on the bottom of your screen to activate the chat window. We'll have time for questions for Lori today, which is exciting, during the second half of the webinar. And we encourage you to use the Q&A function to pose your questions. I'll monitor the question box as we go through, and we'll get to as many questions as we possibly can. And you can find the question and answer function next to the chat icon, and that's just at the bottom of your screen. We will be recording today's session, and we'll have it available for viewing on our website along with the previous two webinars. So if you missed the first two, check them out on there, and we'll have this one posted within the next few days.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. So let's dive into today's session. So the author, William Faulkner, once advised that the key to great writing is to give up your darlings. Essentially meaning you have to be open to get rid of an unnecessary storyline or character, elements you probably love and adore and are close to your heart, but that must be removed for the sake of the overall story, which of course is so difficult to do, but so essential. And this tough love advice applies to so many different areas, but in particular business, because in this rapidly ever-changing world where a whole industry can be born, flourish, and even sometimes die within the blink of an eye, your business must be willing and able to take a good hard look at the products, the service, the structure, what have you, and ask the difficult questions, to be open to reassessing in order to reinvent, even if it means giving up your darlings. So many of today, as we'll talk about, today's most recognizable brands have reached that moment where they had to make a tough decision and pivot and reinvent. And doing that made all the difference in their trajectory. So of course that applies to any businesses being, any time in any businesses being, but I think it's an especially prudent conversation today, given all that we're dealing with COVID and beyond. So that's why we couldn't think of a more fitting person to speak with today than Lore Wainwright. So besides her own diverse and inspiring career filled with community-focused passion projects, and her current role as the Director of Operations and Innovation Works at Pillar Nonprofit Network, Lore works with everyday entrepreneurs. She works every day with entrepreneurs, not everyday entrepreneurs, startups, businesses, large and small. And so we're truly grateful to have a really inspiring, passionate soul with us today. So thank you, Lore, so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kerr. And well, that was a wonderful prelude. I really like it. What I'm going to do, because I was so impressed with our last week's meeting with Mike, I'm going to tell you the story, because he said every story has 3 points. It's a setup, the conflict, and the resolution. So here's mine for our presentation today.
All right, on.
You like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the setup is we all as a global community have been faced with a paralyzing, sometimes fearful situation because of this pandemic. The conflict is that it has created a place of ambiguity where we have to tie in what we know from the past, the unknown of the future, and it's all brought into this present moment, and underlying all of it is this conflict with uncomfortable. And as we resolve ourselves, we are forced to really recognize that it's all going to come down to the people, the place, and the productivity of tying them together where we have to pivot. So that's my story. And I hope Mike, I don't know if Mike's on the call, but he inspired me, so I wanted to share. Awesome. And I do have some slides. They're very picture slides, but I thought we could start with that. My background, I guess from the heart of it, is communication. So I try to be mindful that we all think and go at a different pace, but pictures are something that we can all wrap our heads around. And when we look at how we're going to proceed going forward, I think regardless of where we're going, we need to know where we're coming from. So the very first thing that we have to kind of come back to is our values, our mission. And so I'm going to flip you to the first slide. Kerr's driving the slides, so I'm going to ask him to just flip to that beautiful little house that we've created. And basically what it's saying in this all is that, and this became really clear to me as we were planning for reentry in this place that I work in. Every time we hit a roadblock, the thing that always brought us back to our true north was coming back to our mission. So we always kind of went back to our values. So for those of you that don't know, Innovation Works is a 32,000 square foot building, and it's really created for social innovators. So what is that? That are people, nonprofits, for-profits that have a view to social impact and creating positive impact in some way, shape, or form in our community. And we have our values. There are things like keeping it real, blowing people's minds, planet and people first. So in every notion of our decision-making and our planning and our execution of reentry, we came back to this basic mission and topped our values with it. So underlying everything, people, place, productivity, was always this bed of why we were here in the first place. And I would also add that as part of Pillar Nonprofit Network, one of our guiding strategies is around equity and inclusion. So we also looked at it from that end. So doing a lot of work, and of course, the Black Lives Matter movement has, embraced this shift in our world, in our butterfly effect, if you will. And so that had to be very much part of our planning as well.
Right.
So, when we look into, okay, now what do we do? How do we go from here and start to talk about the people? And when we think about preparing for the people, we have to really understand that at this moment, any way, shape, or form we show up is going to have this element of risk. So we as humans come back to this idea of, well, how are humans reacting to what is happening in our community today? What is happening in the planning of what we need to do? And everyone has a different aspect of fear. So there's this assessment that we need to do in our planning to kind of assess where in our community the fear exists and to what degree does it exist. And then you kind of multiply that with, the threat, so what the hazard is. And then you kind of have to look at what the mitigations to all of that is. So what are the measures, what are the physical measures that are needed to lower the impact of the hazard and give control to individuals so that the fear typically comes down. So understanding risk as we walk into this became really, really important. Yeah, so let's flip to the people side of things. So when we looked at the people side of thing, when you look at the audiences that we were, needing to come to, so it's just the next slide, Car. And we looked at, there's a lot of people that are associated with the change and the implementation to re-entry into a workspace. And one of them very clearly is not, if you're in a nonprofit, is really the board's role. So what is the role of the board when it comes to reentry? And that risk thing becomes really important, because here is where professional and personal boundaries become really interconnected. And we need to understand that everyone comes from a different aspect, a different initiation. And we rely heavily on those that guide us to include equity and inclusion for a positive, inclusive workspace when it comes to, in particular, how we're going to introduce humans back into a space that was built for connection. And you can imagine this was, a shared working space's worst nightmare. And so, we're a sector that typically too runs away from technology. The nonprofit sector wasn't one that embraced technology very quickly. And we see this in many sectors. I was talking to a friend who's in the medical sector, and she's a specialist. And she said, this needed to happen in the medical sector, a long time ago. And so they've actually they feel very positive that this will actually advance medicine. And so we need to look at that. How do people actually interact with the technology that requires us to stay in connected? And then there's this idea when it comes to people that, how do you take that human connection and still maintain it virtually and integrate that into culture? Because at the end of the day, that ambiguity comes to the head when you talk about behavior change and culture change. And it's the hardest change you can possibly have. And layer on top of that, the ambiguity we talked about. Understanding how you integrate human connection with remote being still possible and lived out, we have to understand that there needs to be some kind of interaction with coworkers. And how do we have that space, and how do you work towards that space? So in our culture, in our nonprofit culture, again, we go back to our values. And you will, if you're looking for one key element to walk away from this short presentation, I would suggest that it is the basis of everything. So we have a team alliance, and within this team alliance, we talk about trust, transparency, and multiple ways to check in with each other. Stuff like having fun, communication, work priorities as they relate to working priorities. So, flexible work times. And if your organization didn't have that before, you were actually kind of forced in a position where you have to kind of build on that. So the difficulty is, how do you now take the reality of what's happening today and try to apply that into a culture? If you haven't had the ability to build this into your own work culture, now's the time. You can actually take a moment of pause and say, okay, what's happening in our culture right now? All of a sudden, and you know this better than anyone, because we've been on calls together where I'm sure you've seen kids pop up. You've seen pets come into the world. Never more have you known someone's personal space than you do today. You see my space. I've got the tree of life behind me. I've got, you know, pretty bare wall other than that. But the point is, you are getting to know people at a level that you probably would have never known them before. So the opportunity is there to really come together and say, okay, what, as an organization, as a team, what do we stand for? How can we respect each other's boundaries and spaces in these times? And not just put it down on paper once, but actually bring it up and ask ourselves in team meetings, in different breakout sessions and clusters and whatever it is you work in, how do you live those on a daily basis? So we know, for example, we're not going to go back to the way things were. If we do, we're going to be in trouble because it didn't work, right? This is part of the reason why we find ourselves where we are. So, you know, finding those flexibility and slow down moments are going to be really, really important. And you know, it's not just the day-to-day, it's beyond the day-to-day. So we, you know, we recognize we're in that in-between state. And the fact that we have a moment to slow down really gives us a powerful place of change and transformation. I'm a yogi at heart as well. So I teach yoga, and I was teaching this week on the warriors, warrior 1, warrior 2, warrior 3. And basically it's the notion is that we can't actually let go of ego until we're faced with a transformative environment. And when we let go of ego, when we let go of what we think it should be and hold on to things, that's when it's too rigid and the systems break. So how do you take those moments and allow transformation to happen? It's the moment in pause. So we talk about building and rebuilding soulfully from the ashes. And I really think that's a really strong message, particularly as you're building.
Yeah, and that's what we'll talk in a few moments about, just with even business on a business wide, obviously important on a personal level. And then as your project, your organization, how to take that moment to pivot and or to reinvent, to reassess, to really look at things in an honest way.
And it's the hard work, you know, it's the hardest work you're going to do. And I've also heard the term, the longest distance is the place from the head to the heart, right? That's the longest journey you'll ever take. And, you know, it's right here and here, but it really is, you know, massive when you start looking at the differences in logic to what you feel. And at the end of the day, we're all people.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about the place. Now so next slide really, and this is a shot of the cafe at Innovation Works, which is going to be our bike parking zone during the re-entry. So when we looked at re-entry into this space where it was meant to be a place where conscious collisions happen, we started to having to look at, how do you even start? Like, how do you even start to create this feeling of collaboration and community when you're forced and need to consider this social distancing? So first and foremost, back to the people. We went back to our constituents, our co-tenants, and we asked a lot of questions. I've been on the phone daily, probably 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day with different members, and asking questions, interview style, surveys, research. Our frequency of communication has been at least weekly through emails, daily through interactions virtually, and with partners who know. So one of the things we did right on the get-go is we started a weekly call with other co-working spaces across Canada. So there's 3 or 4 in Vancouver, in British Columbia. And the funny thing that's happened there is, and we have them out east in Guelph and Toronto, CSI in Toronto has been really helpful. But the funny thing there is that now that community is like, hey, there's a group in the Yukon that really would dig this conversation. Can we invite them? So now we have the Yukon in there, and it's just been so tremendous to lean on each other for, what are you doing? Like, what is the best practice? And we've actually pooled all of our resources in one place. and we all went through what we call a change management plan. So how is this going to affect people coming into the space? And walk through that, not alone, but with those people together. And again,
can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah.
Can I just ask, just from a technical point of view, because it might be obvious to some but not others, when you just even say you've compiled all the data in one space, is there even just is that a Google Docs that you use? Is it something, just a living document that everyone's sharing on and contributing to?
It's a Google folder that we all have access to.
Okay,
and
cool.
We call it a passport. A co-working passport is the kind of the bridge, the pan-Canadian co-working passport. So, Kara, if you want to go to British Columbia, we connect you to that co-working space, and you, as a member of Innovation Works, you can go work there. So we've got this shared document repository that is a Google Doc, and every piece of communication, surveys, floor plans, signage, it's all there. So
Cool.
That's been really helpful to all of us.
For sure.
So again, technology has found a way to creep its way, and being a good thing. The other thing that was really, really important was every organization, and Innovation Works included, we created this as a project. So my background is project management, so I go right to the project artifacts. So a project plan, underscoring who's on the project team, what their roles are. I've always said, spend way more time planning than executing. Because if you can plan it with the right people at the right time, in the right forms of communication, the execution is going to actually be a lot simpler. So a lot of work around that. Our work breakdown structure for Innovation Works, which is basically a schedule, a to-do task, is over 400 lines of activity that's required. And you can imagine, if we don't follow that week after week, removing roadblocks for the project team, we really lose sight of what needs to happen. And again, back to our guiding principles. When we ever hit a roadblock, people and planet first is one of our guiding principles. So one of the questions we have always put on the table during COVID reentry is, what are we doing about face masks? It keeps coming to the top of the question, and we go back to people and planet first, and that means we are working daily with the health unit to find out what is the mandate, how can we bring ourselves to that place and ensure that our values are being adhered to. So in Innovation Works, we've landed right now, today, could change tomorrow depending on what the health unit tells us. Face masks are strongly encouraged when you're not able to keep the 6 feet distance and you're not sitting at one spot, but that you're walking around. And then, just like that, we go, okay, how do you observe, monitor, enforce these protocols? One of the things we do at Innovation Works is one of our things is we were having fun doing it. So we're tossing around that if Michelle, you're too close to me and we come close, that I have the song on my phone that's don't stand so close to me by the Police or something like that. Or I say, hey, there's a safe word that we say to each other, like, the Police or whatever it is. But I'm asking the community to come up with that. I'm not coming up with that. So it's going to be easier for them. We had a town hall yesterday reviewing the plan with the members. And I was just so encouraged. And they said, Innovation Works is not a me, myself, and I kind of place. So they don't even see enforcement to be an issue. So I was so happy to hear all of that. Go ahead, Michelle.
I was just going to say, there's almost, some stigmas attached now to COVID, right? And there's barriers to people having, being able to afford masks or, things like that, or people that wear masks and don't wear masks, or, you're in the grocery store and you're going the wrong way, you're not following the arrows and stuff. And I would think, especially in, your situation, we have to remember, I guess, to be kind and support each other, right? And not come at this from sort of a judgmental place, but remembering, yeah, how do we do this in a really respectful, inclusive sort of way, so we're not, shaming people and making them feel bad.
Yeah, someone said, I liked it. They said, address in kindness, hey, I'm not, there's also been talk, and I'm not sure if we're going to do this or not, but having bracelets identifying, red, green, and yellow. Like red, I am like, you need to stay. I that's not comfortable for me. Green being, I can take space, or sorry, I can take, I'm a little more, I feel less risk as an individual. So it's all coming at it with kindness and generosity is really one of our staples for sure. And we call it the dance, Michelle, like in the grocery store, right? You're going down an aisle and someone's coming at you and you're doing one of those dances, and it's going to happen. And I said to people, be prepared for that, because it's going to be weird. It's going to be really weird at first.
Yeah, I guess communication must be key, Lori, right? To try to get these sort of standards out to everybody and make sure that everybody that's in the space is on the same page, right? And so that you're able to be more respectful and navigate and respect each other's boundaries and concerns and stuff.
Yeah. So, if any of you are actually planning back to reentry in a physical space, whether you're on the planning team or you're the one inside of that, I think the level of communication, to your point, Michelle, is there a feedback mechanism? That's so key. Like, is there a point in which you can provide your feedback in a constructive way, whether it be face-to-face or back to the planners or to the people that are in your team or the people that are organizing the return to work? Because without it can't be a top-down kind of communication. It needs to be two ways. It's the only way it's going to work, or it might get controversial. Like we've even, considered de-escalation training for our volunteers for sure. So,
Gloria, I'm wondering, I want to, and sorry to cut you off there, just in respect to time, because I know we had a number of questions and want to talk about also pivoting and reinventing, but I also didn't want to cut you off if there was, want to make sure we get to those, but didn't want to cut you off if there was still some more that you wanted to discuss rather around place, or I'm not sure, was it productivity or?
Well, and I think productivity, this is where the pivoting happens, right? So we can, is there a question in the chat that needs to be?
No, we'll come to that in just in a moment or two, but I'll let you speak on this first, and then it might inspire a couple more questions as well.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. So
I wish we had we'd done 3 hours, Lori, because I know, and from our previous conversations, we can keep chatting about this. I just want to make sure that we get to some people's questions that were kind enough to send stuff in. So
yeah, for sure. Well, okay. So let's flip to the next slide and just talk a little bit about, now you're in the back to work, and, working from home or going in. We have this notion of, and kind of lean on this idea around cohesive and productive teams. So again, this is where you have to kind of look at the not just the results, but also the trust. So I'll flip you to the next slide, Kara, so you can look.
I'm not actually controlling it, but
okay. So on productivity, when you look at the functions of a productive team, it's really around layers. And one of the layers, the single most important layer, is trust. It's fundamental at an emotional level. And we talk back about the agreements with each other. What are you going to do in the face of conflict? What are commitments that you're going to make for each other? And how are we holding ourselves accountable? And it's not just for the leader to do this, it's all members. And then you can start talking about results. So when you build this kind of pyramid of trust and managing conflict and commitment, when all of that's all things evil, that's when you can become creative. That's when you can become agile and adaptable. And, we looked at some organizations within our own space that have done remarkably well in this. So we had a a member that did a lot of public speaking. Of course, that just shut right down. And she pivoted her business to become a coaching business on how to build online courses. Well, guess where her business went, right? Like, she thought, I did a little bit of this. I'm actually okay at it. I think I could teach others to do that. So she had a subscription model that I actually subscribed to. So personally, I wanted to know how to do that. We had another individual whose business has been around for about a year and a half. And some of you may have heard of it. It's called VidHug. He was in the paper as a.
Sorry, what was it called again?
VidHug, VIDHUG. And for a small fee, you can send a link out to your friends, your coworkers, to create a video and send it as a birthday card or as a message to others. And he was really struggling initially because people were doing it themselves. It couldn't be easier to use. And he's on track to do very, very well this year because everyone's trying to stream together videos for messages. I'm sure all of you have been, asked to do drive-bys or, send me a message. This is brainless. Like you literally have to click a button and then click it again, and then you're done. So VidHug has done really, really well. Any of our social enterprises that had to do with textiles quickly diverted their workforce to create gowns, masks, surgical, and also frontline, because there was a problem that a lot of the PPE, the protective equipment, had to be surgical grade. Well, not all organizations needed the surgical grade. So these organizations pivoted very quickly. They went from creating dresses and fashion to surgical gowns and have obtained significant contracts with the government to provide across Canada. That was a fantastic group. Any of the restaurateurs that got on very quickly to do the online and ordering in really quick ways got very, very creative, and they're actually they stuck it out long enough so now that people can take those outdoor patios. They've been able to bridge their learning from those takeout and pickup orders to outdoor patios and have been able to survive. So they've been very successful. And anyone, and I'll challenge this out to you, if anyone can crack the educational nut about how do you take course material and make it engaging for students in a blended way, will be doing very, very well. And I know that there's a couple of incredible programs that have popped up because of this. But I still think there's a huge opportunity for this, and in learning and e-learning, and technology is king, but engagement is going to make it. So how do you gamify a lot of the online stuff? So we had a great discussion with gamification. The other thing too that is, and I mentioned the medical, but from an education perspective, there's been a growing connection of micro-credentials. So because of the ability to have so many online courses, a lot of them are free. I know Harvard has put some really meaningful ones online that are free. I think what we're seeing that as employers going forward, micro-credentials are going to be far more meaningful from an employment perspective than, say, a degree in blah, whatever. So building up your micro-credentials right now, but particularly because you have opportunity to do so, take advantage of that. That will increase your productivity, but also give you a pretty significant advantage over individuals that are just doing a little at a time, or one course at a time.
Yeah,
I'm going to pause.
I hadn't ever heard that term, micro credentials, before, but I like that. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's very, I know, I was like, yeah, I've got a lot of those.
It's
Right?
funny the terms that have come up, like even as Michelle and I have been doing different things with education and gamification, as you said, or micro credentials. They're fascinating things once I go down the rabbit hole online, looking up the amazing things that people are doing to gamify their education programs, etc.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, so I'm going to pause there because I did want to just kind of, open up for questions, comments. And I guess to summarize, start with your values no matter where you go. Understand that the environment around us is ambiguous at best. And it boils down to, the people, no matter what, whether it be how you're getting them back into your place, how you're going to go back and re-enter, or how you're going to be productive as a team, as a group, as an individual. And keeping the lines of equity and inclusion. I'll just always tout that.
Right. Well, and I mean, that certainly applies with, I know we have a large co-op audience here when we talk about values and going back to the principles, right? And I know it's cliche it's a cliche, but it's cliche for a reason. That whole start with why, as you said, know your why, even if that means you have to reinvent and you have a different structure, you change your product, service, whatever, but always coming back to why are we here, and really being able to articulate that, I think, is really important. No matter what that business looks like, as long as you have those values and you have that why that you can articulate.
Well, and I think, like I said, it got us out of a rut. Every time we started planning, we got stuck. We're like, oh, should we wear masks? Shouldn't we wear masks? Well, what do our values say? People and planet first. Well, okay, there you go. It's just, it was like, that's why we did those. Okay. And even in recycling, when we're looking at, the disinfectants that we're using, the paper towels that we're using, we would only use stuff that we could recycle. It was pretty, it didn't matter if it was convenient. If it couldn't recycle it, we didn't want to use it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I know. Sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
I was just going to say, to me, what's, I guess, this whole crisis has been so scary, and all the other things that are going on. And, but, the things that, I guess, the interesting things or the positive things that shine through are things like, I guess I feel like some of us have created this whole new network of connection, right? Like, just like you say, like across Canada now, connections that you never would have made, or, getting a glimpse into your coworkers' homes, or people like that. I mean, in some ways it's peeling back some layers. And I think if we're, sort of embracing this vulnerability and sort of giving each other a chance, and forgiving people for having their kids pop up and their dogs, and reaching out to people that we wouldn't have normally reached out to, and looking to people for answers, and realizing that, we don't have to have all the answers. It's okay. It doesn't mean we're not capable. It doesn't mean, but really understanding, I guess, again, how important it is to do things in a collaborative way, right? To get that feedback and to look to those other experts that maybe you wouldn't have before. I think it's kind of ironic, right? Like, I mean, we're here and we're in our little boxes, our screens, but at the same time, I feel like so many of us has broken out of our boxes, right? And our world is bigger in some ways. I think it's important maybe to remember.
Yeah, and what someone said in one of our so one of the things we did was we implemented virtual calls every day. So on Mondays, we talk about nonprofit fundraisers and resource development. Like, you can imagine how devastated it is as a sector when you can't run an event that raises money for your organization. It will be devastated. We need to prepare for that. So we have that on Mondays. Tuesdays, it's a mental health check-in. Wednesdays we do Salad Club virtually. That has not been a hit, so we'll figure that one out. But on Fridays we do business continuity calls, and anyone's invited to those calls. So I'm happy to share those out with you with this group. And David Bilson was on there, and they run a digital media company, and about 4 years ago, one of their biggest clients left, the main one, the one that paid the bills. And he said, I hit a wall back then. I didn't know what to do. And they had to reinvent themselves, sludging it, like really, you know. And he said, now, today, we are all hitting that wall together. And he said, I'm going to tell you, it's a lot better hitting that wall together than it was 4 years ago when I hit it by myself. I've got the government helping me. I've got these invention ideas coming up. So they actually reinvented themselves, and also created an actual digital incubator. So they help other digital companies grow and incubate their process. So, you know, they went from being the provider to being the provider for providers. So, you know, there are nuggets in there in what you do. And when you can, you know, be with others that are also feeling this, everyone knows that, right? We're in this together. When we say that, that's, you know, it becomes even heightened here. And I will again say, together doesn't mean the same, because I can tell you that the communities that are hit hardest here are the ones that are under a lot of marginalization, and we have to be very aware of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Were there, I know we're coming down to 22, if there was any questions. I know, Michelle, we had a couple of those emailed in to us before that maybe we can pose to Lori.
Yeah. Do you have any theories or predictions or hopes maybe for how businesses and entrepreneurships will evolve after, you know, such a tumultuous time we're living through right now? Any thoughts, Lori?
Again, if you go back to this notion of networks, community, you know, if you have a business that sells and you're not able to sell, then use that time to strengthen the relationships that you have. And it's not through email. Usually get on the phone, talk to people, give them a reassurance of where you are. I mentioned I was a yogi and I'm a fitness instructor. A lot of these boutique fitness studios, so we call them boutique, they're very specialized. So they do Pilates or yoga, or, you know, they don't have a lot of lines of businesses to draw from. Well, they haven't been open for the past 4 months. So, you know, I'm seeing a trend that the ones that have reached out to us in spite of not being having a physical space to go to, I think they're going to do okay. They've been doing the online stuff. They've been calling me. They've been talking to me. I've been paying my dues in some areas because I want them to be around when it does reopen. And the ones that haven't reached out, they're not going to be there.
Yeah.
So it's never too late to do that.
No.
Right.
It's interesting. I've seen a couple of things, even with restaurants that have, you know, right away, they started asking the tough questions and really being honest, but also being very creative and networking. And then a bunch of them came up with, you know, like a kind of meal plan for a week, like a set price, a reduced price. So yes, they weren't getting as much per meal, but they had people ordering 3 nights a week and kind of doing that almost as people like pre-plan their meals on a Sunday and make for the week. You put in your order and so on. And so they pivoted and are doing much, from what I understand and have read, of doing, you know, obviously hit hard, but doing a lot better, being able to come up with these alternative plans, and also evolving as they go. Okay, as you said, this one didn't work. Salad Club wasn't picked up as much, but this does. So really taking the time to assess what is working, what's not, and that's okay if it's not, but what are the common threads of what is working, and is there a nugget in there that, oh, this is what people are responding to, let's go down that trail, I think is really
it sometimes it's not obvious, like, you know, just listen to what people are saying. And it's usually in the subtle energy that they're giving. It's not typically, you know, you should do this. It will never be that. So you have to listen to what the responses are. That's where the nuggets are. It's hard to do, but man, does it pay off.
Yeah, it's so funny when I love going down these rabbit holes and going online searching, you know, I encourage anyone to just do a thing about companies that have pivoted or reinvented. when you see the list of them, they're all the biggest brand names that we know. Everyone had to do it, right? You're talking Amazon, Airbnb, Twitter, Old Spice. Like you think of Netflix, you used to have to mail. They would mail you the DVD and you would drop it in the mailbox back. I mean, it's crazy to us now, but
How
you know,
old are you?
the haircut gave me away, right? But I mean, it's not like, well, you know, this is again going back to that, having to give up your darlings a little bit. Sometimes it doesn't mean you have to give away, you have to give up on your dream, but you do have to be flexible enough to go. We have to change with the times, and we have to be honest about what people are asking for rather than just what I want to sell them.
Yeah, and I think it's also a good insight to your brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is the best time to feel what your brand strength is, and it'll tell you if people see you and notice you or not. And maybe it's a time to redesign that and do that work that you do when you look at customer insights. Who have you been? Who do you want to be? What are your customers telling you that they want?
Yeah.
Really basic marketing 101.
Yeah.
But I mean, those are amazingly simple and profound questions. Just putting those down on paper and really answering those like a SWOT analysis, Lori, I think those questions are amazing.
Yeah. And I think, like you say too, it's important to stay connected, right? I mean, you know, you want to retreat, or you think maybe you're not relevant right now, or you turn inwards, but really pushing outwards, right? And staying connected and really listening to people and remaining out there and looking at the big picture, looking forward to see how you can, because I think there's always a way that you can transform, that you can connect with people, and that you can keep going. I mean, you know, we've had to go strictly online. You know, obviously we haven't been able to have people here, and, you know, just with this webinar series, you know, rather than having it in person, you know, I think there's still value, and you do what you can, right? You do what you can, and you stay connected, and you stay out there and keep building those relationships and looking for new ways to connect and be present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I also think there's some really huge opportunities, even in, you know, the media sense. You know, the local papers were going away. Well, they're kind of coming back because these stories are, you know, they hit to the heart. So, you know, there's opportunity in education in particular when it comes to storytelling. They're going away from textbooks. You know, so where are those case studies? Where are those nuggets of stories to help infuse continuing education or engaged learning? It's going to be profoundly different. It definitely is. And I think this is the time to just, again, they are subtle energies out there. And if you can pick up on those, you will be very, very, I think you're going to make it through pretty much anything.
Well, I mean, let's maybe in respect to time, I think that's a good positive note to words of affirmation, Lori, that maybe we can, but I don't want to cut you off if there's, I don't know if Michelle or Lori, any last thoughts as we kind of move to wrapping up for today?
Lori?
No, I would just say, you know, when in doubt, who are you? Just tap back into that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I like that. Well, Lori, we could go for hours chatting with you and picking your brain. We didn't even get into your amazing career with Bell Let's Talk and your amazing not-for-profit and charitable organizations and projects. So I'm sorry that we didn't get into all that today, but maybe that'll be a chance for that another time, part two.
Part two, yeah, and it continues.
But thank you so much for joining us today, Lori. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, and thanks for a great group, a fantastic group. Really appreciate that opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, so for everyone else out there, I just want to say thank you for joining us the last 3 weeks, and thank you to our amazing guests. We do have a quick survey on our website, which the website comes up in just on the next slide in a moment. It'll only take you a couple minutes, but it'd be really valuable if you don't mind. A couple comments, a couple multiple choice questions, should take you 3 minutes. But we'd really appreciate the feedback. You can find it there. That's on the website. You can go right to the survey there. And also, this is recorded, and on that same page, if you follow the Co-opalooza link, you will see all 3 of these webinars. Some people have written in, and it's great to hear that people want to share them with their team or others. We've put them on our YouTube channel and also online, also on our webpage, so you can watch them there. This one will be up just shortly afterwards. And of course, if you have any questions or comments at all beyond the survey, please don't hesitate to send us an email. And also, I encourage everyone to check out Pillar Nonprofit Network and Innovation Works. Michelle and I, we have, and I'll mess up the term. I would say like a hot desk, or what would we call it, Lori?
We have a flex desk, yes.
Flex desk, sorry. So, but we just love going to, it's such an amazing space you and your team have created and fostered there. It's exciting. It's a buzz every time you go.
Yeah, every time we leave there, we're just buzzing with ideas, and it's such an inspiring space. Yeah, so thank you again, Lori, and thanks so much to everyone for joining us over these last 3 weeks and today. And I think we'll just stick around and leave the chat function open for a few minutes. If there's any comments or questions for us. But other than that, thanks so much. Everyone stay safe and stay cool. It's hot out there.
Yeah.
Thanks all.
Yeah,
thanks. Take care.
Bye. Big heart.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
Bye.